Hey, it's Ross Saunders, and this is Technically Compliant, the podcast for all the CTOs who've looked at their data architecture and thought, there is no way this can be compliant, and then had to make it compliant anyway. In every episode, I talk to a CTO who's been in the privacy trenches, the ones who've had to retrofit consent management into legacy systems, or explain to their board why they need to hire privacy engineers, or figure out how to handle a data subject access request that touches 17 different databases. This isn't about what the textbooks say, it's about what actually works when you're balancing compliance, velocity, and a tech stack that's held together with optimism and third-party APIs. It's real problems, it's real solutions, real talk, and because of that real talk, their views are their own and not necessarily that of their employers, past or present. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Technically Compliant. Today, I am speaking to Byron Rode. He is a father, a runner, a surfer, and a human from my native country of South Africa. So glad to have you on there, and everyone's going to have our accents to deal with today.
Yeah, it's a South African cast. Thanks for having me, Ross. It's been really, really cool to dive into this. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we've had a couple of conversations before starting this, which I think is going to be really interesting. And we kind of ended up having what could have been a whole podcast when we were discussing. So Byron is the co-founder and CEO of Ignis Labs, founder of MyCards. He's a chapter director of the CTO Academy. He's on the board for Word of Mouth. And in the past, he was CTO with Yebo Fresh. Did I get all that right?
You did, indeed.
Fantastic. And I think from our conversations that we've had, I think we've got a bit of a double bill around privacy and security, talking about the MyCards and loyalty side of things, as well as a bit of the Yebo Fresh side and some cool stuff you were doing there previously when you were there. So folks, welcome to Technically Compliant. We're going to jump in then. So I think, Byron, let's kind of set the scene here. If you can give me a bit of a description about kind of Yebo Fresh, MyCards, where you've been, what problems you were faced with. Let's give some context for the listeners.
Cool. I mean, we've got a pretty storied history in technology, 25 years in the industry. It's been a long time, actually. I started at Yebo Fresh. It was my first real CTO gig, I guess, if you will. Before that, I'd done head of technology and engineering manager or lead architect or some kind of role. And I took over from a very, very great guy, Mike Jones, who had kind of been the COO/CTO. And he'd built a really solid foundation. And I came in and I had just come off a bit of contract work in the United States as a CTO. And I was kind of, trying to find my way in South Africa, in the CTO space. And joined Yebo Fresh. And that was a great couple of years of just building our technology in a sector that was very different to the rest. In traditional sectors, you've got people who have a credit card and a nice computer at home and jump on the internet and order from Takealot or Amazon or wherever, and they receive their goods and all's fine. But in the informal sector, it's very, very different. The bigger townships have this, but the smaller little spaza shops and the little stores that are selling goods don't have those tools. And the purpose of Yebo Fresh was to bring that kind of FMCG sales process into the informal sector, and I worked there for just under 3 years. I then left and formed a fractional CTO consultancy for a while. So I ran Roadhouse, which was my little consultancy, and I would kind of do fractional work for different companies and bring about architectural changes, etc. And that worked really, really well. And around November 2024, I had seen on Twitter that Stokard was leaving South Africa. And, it was kind of at the agentic engineering had just kind of come in and it was kind of exciting. So I was like, well, you know what, let me see what I can do. And I opened up Xcode and, we weren't really at that full agentic experience yet where you could kind of just prompt and let it go. But I hand wrote some code, built some stuff, and within a couple of days, it built a little prototype app. And I shared it on Twitter, and it gained quite a bit of bit of excitement. So I was like, well, maybe this is worth it. And I built the product and I released it. And it was iOS only and I expected nothing. And it was about 8 months later that it was acquired through a bigger deal. And as a result, formed Ignis Labs along with other directors from the holding company, and started My Cards as an actual real business.
That's awesome.
And then
I was seeing the LinkedIn post.
Yeah. And then we segued, obviously, because that falls within loyalty, we segued into the full My Loyalty. And that's the new product that's come out now, which is, something we've spoken about a little bit. And we can probably have a lengthy conversation on its own.
Yeah, no, loyalty is an interesting space when it comes to privacy, I must say.
Exactly. Especially with the stamp-based or card-based loyalty, when you have a little physical card and you lose it, you just lose your points. But now when you have to bring that across, privacy is an interesting one.
I still had my Stocard app for a while after leaving, and maybe I've got something better now when I go back to it. So,
yeah, definitely, and we've got so much more in store. But look, privacy is paramount it's been paramount for me as a personally. I've been in a few data breaches. Have I been pwned emails all the time? Every time I get added to another one, it's an ongoing thing. But I have had my identity somewhat stolen in the past, and I think for me that's always been a big proponent of why I build the way that I build.
It makes it very personal. I've been there. I've had mine stolen and took years to get it back and get a credit rating again and all sorts.
100%. Yeah.
So I want to jump back to what you were saying with Yebo Fresh, and kind of speaking into specific challenges that kind of bring you into action in terms of privacy. And you mentioned, going to folks without a traditional space of credit cards and things like that. And we had discussed previously around validating those kind of customers. So can you talk a bit to, what's involved with validating customers without that digital identity attached to them?
Yeah, quite a lot. Funny enough, like you would think it would be pretty straightforward, and we try to make it as simple as possible. When you transition from something that is non-digital and quite archaic, or just no lack of any form of identity, and then try and introduce digital systems into it, it's very, very difficult, because it's not only the privacy element, but there's all the other parts that go along with it. So we had to consider a number of things. The store owner could not speak English as a first language. They could be an owner who has limited understanding of a cell phone, but is very good at selling, or doesn't have internet at home, or didn't have anything. So we had to kind of, sit down and figure out, how do we build a minimum viable digital identity? Maybe there's a new thing in there, but we had to have some form of way of knowing who you were and how to identify you. Insofar as not only was it just those difficult things, but it was the case of, oftentimes in the informal sector, people will have a cell phone today and then they will get a new number in the next 3 months. There are a number of nuances as to why. We won't obviously go into the details here, but, number changing was quite often a big thing. So how do you manage someone's identity when their number changes? And how do you manage that security when inevitably, if a number gets recycled and that person, the number gets a notification that they want to now all of a sudden go and log in, and how do we prevent that?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So that I hadn't even thought about that kind of challenge of delivering a message to a new owner of a device.
Exactly. So, you might have a legacy system that just sends out a WhatsApp or an SMS, and the number receives and it's like, oh, here's your invoice or whatever. And that could have personally identifying information on it that now then becomes into the realm of somebody else. And that happens. You could throw out something in the trash and somebody finds it on the road. There's a number of reasons or ways that this can happen. Personally identifying information can be found, but it's how do you reduce that vector of what they can do with it once they have found it. And so what we did is we built this model around not only having your personal identifiable information, but what business information could we pertain from that, right? So it could be things like a store name. It could be what was your regular product that you would often buy from us on a weekly basis. How often was your order habit? What was your order basket size? Did you deliver to multiple areas? What was your preferred delivery date? We would take a lot of those kind of things that are personal, nuanced, and put it into the system, and is a way to, one, identify who you are, but also to ensure that we can start to form some form of digital identity within the system that is identifiable but without a number.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So this gives me a few things to think of in here. So it's interesting coming from South Africa and knowing as well, because for those listening, one of the interesting nuances around South African privacy law is that the law applies to jurisdictional persons as well. So what that means, in essence, is that any business or corporate entity has personal information, and you need to treat it as such. So I think it's great that you were addressing that kind of thing well and treating that as personal information. I find a lot of companies, especially in the dev space, and I think partly to blame for this is the way we classify data in security, where things are confidential, sensitive, public, or internal, and we assume that's what it is. And PII is just personal, and it's just a name, where that's really not the case in the way things actually work, and that anything 100%. That you're inferring and bringing in from a different aspect is all ties into this profile, and the profile itself becomes the PII.
Exactly.
I feel like I'm half just getting my thoughts organized as to where to go. With what you were saying there, and those numbers change, but also limiting the PII that gets exposed. And then you also hit on something like a data subject request as to, how do you identify someone? Let's talk about the limiting of the data in each surface that you had there. So you mentioned a lot of stuff there between the stores, the sales habits and the profiling and that kind of thing, plus the WhatsApps and the challenges that someone's number might change. How did you limit what is seen on the front end, what's seen on the back end? How did you kind of protect those aspects of it first?
Phased approaches, very similar to a gated approach that you would do with some form of security, right? You have a gate and you have a key and you open the gate, but that doesn't necessarily get you in far enough. You can sort of see in the background. So it was a similar kind of approach to how we would do things, right? If you would send in a WhatsApp with your number and we identified your number as being a number that was on the system, and obviously when you send us a message, that isn't obviously just a text message. It's an API payload in the background that contains a lot of information that is tied to WhatsApp. So WhatsApp can identify you even if you change your number by them having a unique identifier. So we could use that unique identifier as a means of, does this unique identifier exist? We would hash it. We would never store the same unique identifier. So we would sort and hash and then compare. And does the hash match? Okay, great. We now have found that this person is potentially who they say they are in the system. And then dynamically would feed in information into the system. Very similar to, I guess, if you were to apply for a form of financial contract in South Africa, and you type in your ID number, and then they'll be like, do you own this property? And do you own this car? And so a very similar approach to going, hey, what was your last order? For example, what was the order number of your last order? Great. Now I found an invoice in the dustbin, and I rattle off the invoice. So the immediate assumption is I'm going to ask you questions about that invoice, and we would completely throw it out. And then we go, okay, great. Now you ordered from us on the 3rd of December. What did you order? It's hard to do that because it's a blocker from a usability perspective. As a user experience, it's quite crap. You have to be like, I'm now slowing you down when all you want to do is pay money to us, and that's what we really want. But it was important to ensure And that speaks again, if you think of this vector, you can think of multiple attack surfaces just on that, right? You could do a SIM swap, for example, and get the person's number. So now I can WhatsApp the line, and now the number is identifiable, but the user identifier might be different. But if you then start to pick up all these questions, okay, what was your last? And then all of a sudden now, you've kind of thrown the trail off. So we did it it was very much an approach of how you do, I guess, even physical security. Make you climb over every sharp piece of metal and barbed wire, etc. And if you can make it all the way to the end, then you're very likely the person that we're letting you in. And if not, you're very good at being the person that you want to get in which case, how do you navigate that? So we had to consider that. Quite a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to like a very responsible approach in terms of risk management. And you have those different inputs into this where you've got like what is the degree of certainty that this is the person? How much is that affecting the user experience at the end of the day? And you strike a balance. I think, and this is something I've seen with companies that are perhaps starting out or sort of sometimes new founders or folks that are venturing into a product for the first time tend to go for the nth degree of security and full certainty and all of that at the expense of user experience. Or they do the flip side where, we're gonna make the assumption that this is the person because we don't want to hinder them.
Exactly. In which case you then open up and finding that balance is hard. And if you go back to the beginning, when we were introducing this system into the informal sector, a lot of these people had been used to being served by a sales agent, right? A guy like a rep come in, take an order, punch it in on their phone. Great, you get a delivery the next week. Now it's like, hey, we want to make you order for yourself. And it was a very ambitious goal at Yebo Fresh was to bring technology into the informal sector. But also, we wanted to encourage that kind of buying behavior because it really is, when you do realize it really is a good thing. But the security, I think the security side around just making sure, and we had to also protect not only the customer's data, but their own customer data, right? We were starting to get people that were going to then come and start to deliver products. So we would deliver products to you in the store for somebody else, which meant that the order was placed by the store owner on behalf of somebody else. So now you have a fragmented personal identifiable information because now you've got that other bit of information that isn't necessarily going to do anything, but it does give you a name, potentially an email address and or a cell phone number. And that's mostly what people want anyway in these cases for those dirty marketing lists that they want to send out. But then there's obviously, can I go and try and hack your bank account? Can I try and hack can I do a SIM swap on your name? Those kind of things. So we didn't only think of our security. We had to think of the security of the store owner and their security of their customers because it's a full circle. So it was it was a very interesting thing to try and protect against.
Yeah. And, I think, and something that's coming to mind now, and you've mentioned it in a couple of spaces and limiting the exposure of that data. With the amount that's available to you and the cool stuff that you can do with the data, how did you go about limiting what you took to being what is actually valid for the use case, as opposed to kind of going all ahead and collecting as much as we can because we can get cool statistics and do cool stuff?
And that, so very tricky because two businesses, the two business models there kind of conflict with each other, right? There is the legal requirement of how much information we had to hold in order to facilitate you as a customer and to facilitate your delivery. So that would be a location. It could be a 3 words. It could be a GPS point of, we had to have those bits of data, and how we tried to do them was to put that data on a separate object or model. So instead of attaching the data to the user, we attached the data to the order because it was very simple if we needed to divorce the user from the order, and all of a sudden you've lost quite a fair amount of information. But in the same breath, an order and invoice, those things had to have certain requirements. We were required. And one of the reasons that this was such a big thing is that we were not a credit provider, but we provided product as a means of credit to vetted, store owners that had gone through a process. But now there was now also a financial element to it, because now all of a sudden there could be a credit balance that I could use to order from. So we would look at the bare minimum: name, surname, and sometimes not even a surname, just sometimes your first name, store name even. We didn't even need your personal details if you weren't willing to do it. There is a lot of political reasoning behind the whole thing within the informal sector. That's another conversation for its own day, but we had to manage those things as well. So we tried to take as very little as possible. Mobile number, and we even had a way to work mobile numbers as email addresses. We built a whole service around that so that we could still deliver email to a mobile number. We would never surface personal information in SMSs or WhatsApps, for example. That would only be the basics. If there was any personal information that was required or any way that we would then take somebody, verify them via an OTP, and then only take them to an offline form that they could then fill in and do some stuff, and that was secure. Okay. We tried never to have more than your store, your name, how can we contact you, because we have to deliver to you and we need to phone you or we need to email you. And internally within the company, obviously, then there were a lot of protections and measures that we would put into place then to protect that information internally. So publicly, very little, name, surname, like I said, store name, your orders. Internally, there was a lot more data. A lot of times sales reps would get on the phone, have a phone call, place an order on their behalf, etc. And the internal security was the extra, like the biggest, because as you know, that is the bigger vector for attack, is to find somebody in the business that is easy to give you the information. So scoping that was big.
So two things coming from this part as well. And I think one, just I want to tie it back, just because it's something I see in the field a lot here.
Sure.
And I think it's good for the listeners, is that limiting of data. And it's good what you were saying about how you match someone previously and using the information you have. What happens a lot with companies is someone will put in a data subject request, or they'll want to do some function that requires validation. And the first jump is to ask for a government issued ID, which is collecting more information than you need and you possibly have. And you really don't want to be collecting additional pieces of information to validate someone whose information you already have. Yeah. And I think it was really good that you have these data points, and that's how you would validate people. So I just wanted to kind of...
Yeah, we never used identification. The only time we ever took identification was if you were taking credit. And that was just because legally we had to. And we had to store it somewhere, and we had to make sure. So, internally, I was not only the CTO, but I was the CIO at Yebo Fresh. So I was the mandated person that had to sign up all the governance and privacy. So as you can imagine, that's always quite a risky little bit of thing to know. So I vetted and scrutinized everything and everybody to ensure that what was the minimum viable data set that was necessary in order to operate the business. And then thereafter, if we needed to gather other information, it was behavioral rather than personal.
Yeah. And jumping back to what you were saying on the securing side now as well. You mentioned security, and you mentioned to me previously around pen testing and things like that. Yeah. How did you tie all of that in, and how did that work in the platform, the security side?
Good question. So the pen testing was an exciting one. It was a 6-week pen testing process, quite long, lengthy, detailed. It involved multiple people. We had to vet this, to ensure that there was no way to get into the system. And we'd actually made it so secure that they couldn't test in the first week. It was actually quite locked down. Like, we were like, cool, go ahead, figure out what you can do. And they're like, we don't even know where the URLs are properly. We gave them access to systems as well to kind of go, okay, great, you're a customer, you're an end user, you're a store owner, and we gave them different scoped roles, and then said, have at it, go in and do whatever you can. And precursory to that, we'd obviously had a few discussions around what was necessary in order to sign off the pen test, right? Because the security here is paramount because one, you could steal user data if you got it wrong, but two, you could make financial purchases on a person's account without verification. So we had to secure that down. It's a hindrance in some ways or form. Hey, you want to make this order, place the order. You say, place the order. Okay, great. We're going to send you an OTP. Then you get the OTP. You got to come back. It's like but security wise and the pen testing for us, in order for me to say I, as the CTO, was okay to sign this off, the pen test was my non-negotiable. I was okay if it didn't look 100% okay. I was okay if we sent 30 SMSs instead of one, because you can walk back that. You can say, hey, like it was a tech issue. You can't walk back, hey, this is a data breach. And a data breach, a data breach follows you wherever you go. You know, like if I was the CTO at the thing and there was a data breach, then everywhere I go from there, I was the CTO that had the data breach at Yebo Fresh. You know, so like it was always paramount to me to make sure that it was secure. So we did OWASP, obviously, as a bare minimum. You know, those were kind of the things we went and we gave basically multiple attack vectors. Here is an invoice. Here you go. You've got an invoice that's got personally identifiable information. It wasn't real personally identified. It was from our staging environment. Obviously, we never gave real customer data out during those things. And all of this testing was done in the staging environment. And what we did was, when we initially set that up, we took all of the data and fully anonymized it. So it would have been, you know, Joe Soap instead of Byron Rode or whatever it was down the line. Numbers were in. And then internally, we went and we used a local company and we bought, I think it was 100 SMS, like 100 SIM card, digital SIM cards and numbers. And we signed those up with different accounts. And then that was so go ahead, you find your way, WhatsApp the line, inject code, try, you know, cross-scripting, try SQL injection, try anything that you can. Here are the APIs. We'll give you the APIs. You're going to surface a token. I can guarantee you the token that you would have got out of a semi-authenticated WhatsApp would have given you the same information had you been in WhatsApp, had you hit our API. So it was scoped all the way down. Tokens were issued for the relevance that they were. We verified it with OTP. I think in some cases, I think I might have over-engineered some of the security. And perhaps maybe we did. But yet, you know, if I look back at that, it's one system that I know was never, ever even. There were times that we locked our own selves out. So that shows, you know, nice. where those things. So yeah, I made sure that for me, we were opening up a platform to, I think at that time it was about 30 different stores into two big areas, Joburg and Cape Town. And customers, you know, it was tens of thousands of customers. And 25, I said 25 stores, 25 townships within Joburg in South Africa. So there were hundreds of stores in some areas. We had to make sure that the data was safe, but also considering the political climate, considering the informal settlement, all of that had to be considered, because not only were you risking people's data, but you were risking their very livelihoods if that data went out. So for me, security was paramount.
Yeah, the context matters. The context always matters.
Exactly.
Going from that and the stuff you learned there, I want to flip a bit to the QR and the loyalty side and kind of what you learned from that and what you've brought in now. So we were talking about QR codes. Perhaps give us a bit of a background of kind of how that works, and we'll go into a couple of questions there before we wrap up.
Cool. So like, in order to understand where I went and how we architected this whole thing, you have to understand the context, right? So if you walk into a coffee shop or a store that offers you a stamp card, right? You get a physical card. It's either stamped or written or signed or whatever it is, and you carry this little card around with you in your pocket. But you order your coffee, you hand your card, they stamp your card, you walk away. Very simple transaction. There's absolutely no mental thought around it, and there is no security because you don't need to. If you lose your card, you lose your coffee. Whoops. Moving that into the digital space comes with its very similar kind of processes that we had in the informal sector. In this case, it's a little bit different now. A QR code that is stored on the device it could be static. And if it's static, it could contain information, right? So I scan that and I get that information. Anybody can scan that with any camera anywhere in the world and they will be able to pick that up. So there is one publicly scannable QR code, and that is the only one that takes you to the landing page to join the loyalty program for said store. That is it.
Yeah.
Everything else is dynamic beyond that point. And again, there is certain information that we require. So when you have a physical card and a stamp, you don't need your name because I'm going to come in with my card. But there is no vetting. There's no verification. I bring in a full card. You give me a free coffee. I walk out the door. I could have beat somebody up out the road for that. It doesn't matter.
Issue the holder with...
Exactly. That's all it is. Issue the holder. Whereas with the QR code, there's a little bit more. So we need to take some identifiable information and we again, bare minimum. So the choice is your first name. That is all we need. We don't need more than that. The store doesn't actually need more than that. Most people are willing to give more than that, but, and a mobile number or an email address. And the way that it is done in such a way. So if you remember the beginning of how I spoke about this, is that when you walk into a store, it's a very quick and simple transaction. Hand a card, get a stamp, get it back. It had to be exactly the same. You're going to walk into a busy Starbucks or a coffee shop anywhere, and you've got 500 people standing behind you, and then you've got to fill in 6 forms, scan a QR code, copy your ID, take a photo, do this. The people have walked out the door behind, and you've not really got any loyalty. You've got disloyalty. So I had to ensure contextually that we made the process as simple as possible. So it is exactly the same. You walk up to the counter, instead of handing a card, you take a photo of or you scan the QR code with your camera. And it's going to ask you for your first name and your mobile or your email address. And we're going to store that encrypted on the device. And the only time we will then send it through to the thing is once we need to now issue your stamp. And we create a small, again, digital profile of that person. I am very big on not knowing email addresses and wanting to know those people. So data is encrypted at rest. Okay. It is encrypted at during transfer of data, so over any of those protocols, and it is decrypted when it is needed to be decrypted, and it is decrypted by the system. I don't know what the decryption code is. I purposely built it in such a way. There is a storage of it. We obviously have to keep some level of storage here because if something goes wrong and we have to change that key, we need to ensure that we have a way to, exactly. Yeah. So we don't want to have a similar instance of what happened to me with data loss, where I wasn't able to decrypt. So quite an interesting story, a little bit of a segue, but Apple have very good privacy and security on their devices. And when you form what they call a group container, which allows you to store container data within your sandboxed environment in your phone, there is an undocumented thing that if you don't specify a specific URL or a key or whatever it was that they mentioned, your data becomes inaccessible when you transfer from the old account to the new account. So we went, hey, we're transferring the app from this account to this one. And they were like, green ticks, all the green ticks, transferred it across, launched the next version of the app, and everybody's data was gone. And it was, I think that those couple of weeks was the worst thing, because it was a trust issue. Now all of a sudden and I'm like, your data isn't gone. What happened is Apple moved the house and said you can't have the keys. The keys have to remain here. So I never wanted something like that to happen. So I've put in little bits of protection and measures in place, but I don't want to know your data. I don't want to know it. The only person that can look at your data is the store owner, and that he can log in, and he has to log in. And when he logs in with his username and his password, it goes and generates an API key that is used for that session. We generate JWT tokens that are session-based for the time being. And then we use that token to decrypt the data by pulling the hash. So it's like it's a bit of a 3-part system. It needs the hash, it needs the user to log in and have a token, and then we can go and say, okay, and decrypt the data. The other one, which I've mentioned to you, is the same as what most people do. We give you a support pin when you phone in, we can type in a pin, and that pin will allow us to decrypt some of your information to be able to see it.
You say what most people do. It's probably what most people should do.
Exactly. When I say what most people do, it's what most big companies that I've worked with, when they know that PII is massively important, everybody else doesn't really care. So to that point, so with the loyalty stuff, it's quite tricky. So we made sure that our friendly Hardy does. I don't know if you can pick them up on
that sound.
I don't know if you can pick it up. Sorry, I'm thinking of the Hardy Dog. So the QR code needs to be quick and efficient, but it has to be secure. So any one of those QR codes that you scan, you're just going to get garbled letters. Each account, each store owner has its own encryption for its own QR codes. So I can take your encryption key or your encrypted QR code, come in and set up a business and decrypt what I think is mine, and you're still going to get garbled. We've done 3-stage encryption. So it's an encrypted. Again, I don't know if it's too much information, but the thing is that, like, I'm now saying to somebody, and we're not only just doing loyalty, we're doing loyalty not just for coffee shops, but we're doing it for places where you could go and spend 10,000 and get 1,000 Rand back in points, for example, as a loyalty. We could issue you a gift of 1,000 Rands worth of loyalty points. That has a financial bit of data to it. And if I said, hey, Ross, I found your QR code and I've gone and spent 2 grand at Take-A-Lot because I found your code, you're going to be pissed. Nobody's going to trust the system.
You're speaking to someone who was a bit of a points hacker, and I used to rack up points in loyalty.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is a lot.
Exactly. And so that's exactly the thing. So I'm trying to prevent that, but I'm also trying to do it in such a way. So we will, when you sign up, we will send you an email, welcome you to the platform, and we will let you go and you can scan, issue your stamps as many times as you want to. But we're going to hit a limit, and the store owner determines what that limit is. And at that point, you now have to verify your email address. So next time you log your QR code and it pops up, we're going to go, hey, you need to type in, your email address. It has to match the one that is decrypted or encrypted on the device. And then we do an API call in the background and then send them an OTP. And then we have to now verify. So then you can only now start to issue. And if your email address is not verified, if I know yours, Ross, and I go and I type and I join and I go, well, maybe you have a loyalty card and I type your email address, I might be able to see 1 or 2 of your points if we have had that interaction with the API. But when it comes time to rewarding those points, when it comes time to making sure that you can actually do it, you're not going to be able to do that, because now all of a sudden I'm no longer Ross. I'm Byron pretending to be Ross. How do I confirm that? I can't verify that OTP via email. I can't do those things. So we've done a very similar approach to what we did with the mobile number and business, but identifying you now based on your thing. If you scan a My Loyalty card, a QR code, at one store and you go to another store, they are completely separate. Even though you have one user identity in the system, because we have to be able to identify that one core service. I can't pick up from one to the other who you are. The other store will never know who I am. And even though there is PII information attached to both stores, all 3 of us would have to be sitting in the same room with somebody with a gun to all of our heads and saying, each one of you have to log in and do something in order. At least that's how I've tested it so far. We run continuous pen testing. The beauty of agentic engineering now is you can, you can spend a couple of $100. I don't think it's the be all and end all. We should still obviously be going to a third party. So we verify our stuff externally as well. When this whole thing happened and the acquisition, all came about, everything had to be vetted as part of the DD so I've gone under quite a bit of scrutiny and so far have come out unscathed. But great. I don't let that become something I'm like, oh, I'm pretty good at this, because the moment you drop your guard, that's the moment that somebody goes, okay, there we go, I found my entry point.
And it's interesting you speak about due diligence and things like that, and like M&A processes and acquisitions and so on. I'm seeing more and more the kind of PI privacy stuff. I remember 5 to 8 years ago doing checks for acquisitions, and it was just security. There wasn't much beyond security. Whereas you look at them now, it's very much coming into the privacy space, PII, the risk involved there.
Yeah,
it's good to see, and it's something to be ahead of.
100%, and I work. So I'm still ultimately a tech person, and I've been doing this for so many years. I I work and I consult to different places. So I consult to banks. I've done consulting to banking. There, PII is, you can't even request somebody's first name without having to go through 60 pages of information and sign off. But I think in 2026, where we are now, and if you look at the number of vector supply chain attacks that have happened and how much PII has been stolen just from those things, if privacy isn't number one on your list when you're building a product from day dot, then you shouldn't build a product now if you've got personal information. And I'm sorry, I would rather spend 6 months on privacy and spend 1 month on UI and user experience and kind of build it up as we go, but know that it might not look great. And it might be a little bit clunky because I'm asking you to do 3 or 4 things to identify yourself. But I'm doing that so that when your data inevitably gets stolen in a data breach by a corporate that hasn't got enough protection in place, and they now have enough vector information to go, great, I can piece together Ross. So let me go find where I can find Ross on the internet. My goal is to make sure that our products never allow that to happen. And we are launching bigger things with My Cards in the future. We're working with the Department of Home Affairs through a third party to do identity verification through those systems that are government approved. When we get to that level, the security goes to max. Now we are holding a government issued identity card and the information that pertains to that. So for me, that is a big thing. And I've been working on that for 2 years. For 2 years, I've been building this process and testing and battle testing, because once you put an ID on a telephone and that phone can get stolen and somebody could potentially know your PIN, that frightens me beyond anything else.
It's interesting. One of the cases that I read about recently was in Namibia and happened to a friend of mine. She was mugged, stole her phone, but before leaving, they held her up at knife point and demanded her PINs and her access to the phone and to turn off the facial identity before they left.
I've been seeing a lot of that.
It's really crazy.
I've seen a lot of, even in the Uber space with this happening. And I mean, this is why the privacy is so important to me. You get an Uber driver gets somebody jumps in the car and then all of a sudden they hold them up at gunpoint, and the same thing, Face ID, unlock your phone. Great. Turn off all of these things while you're here with a gun to your head. Of course, you're going to switch all those things off.
Yeah.
Then what
happens? Your digital life. Yeah.
Exactly. Look, digital identity and digital privacy, I've thought about this for many, many years. I would love where we could have a digital identity service layer that was really robust. My problem is not the security of the data. We have very smart people on this planet that can build secure things. Problem is the humans that are always, and it's the human in the loop that is always the issue. Corruption and those things is what make. So I get scared when I would love to have a way that we could digitally identify you without you having to tell me who you were. We all have a fingerprint of sorts, and that fingerprint is based on my usage, my internet behaviors, the things that I do, where I go, what I do, who I speak to, what I see. But having one government organization or one organization that holds on and owns that data is very, very petrifying. But I think we're getting to the point now. I think politics aside, I think we're getting to the point where we're having we're a world of people now. There are no more borders anymore. With cryptocurrency, financial borders are gone, with all of these things. So a digital identity now doesn't matter if it's government ID. It's very important that you protect that. And it's very important as a custodian of your data that I protect your data. And the moment that changes, I will leave this industry because then I'm no longer fit for purpose.
Yeah. Byron, thank you so much for this. This has been enlightening. I think there's been so many excellent points in here. And I think towards the end there were some quotes of the day that I'm going to be cutting out and putting that on LinkedIn. Send me your invoice. But this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the listeners for being there as well.
And I'm looking forward to going into more detail when we scale the security up to max, and we have to discuss this in more detail.
We'll have episode 2 and we'll dive into loyalty, because that is a whole other world. So
I'm looking forward to
again.
Ross,
thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
And you too. And thank you to our listeners. Till next time.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you got value from this episode, the best thing you can do is subscribe and share it around. Send it to your engineering leads, your privacy team, or that CTO friend who's 6 months behind where you were. Now, we're just getting started with this podcast, and honestly, ratings and reviews make a huge difference in helping other CTOs find it. If you've got 30 seconds, please leave a quick rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps. Till next time, hit those backlogs and get yourself at least technically compliant.